MoveLang is evolution.
Enables you data mutability, like versioning of your data.
Data is an absolute dream.
The biggest thing exists but is underutilized is the Move Prover.
One thing that I would definitely love to see is debugging tools.
AI meets blockchain. Hype, future, or complete trash. Okay, guys, we're gonna get started here. So we're gonna be talking about MoveVM Layer 1 innovations, and we'll start with introductions of the panel.
Hi everyone, I'm Levente, happy to be here. I'm from IOTA. We are adopting Move as one of the OG L1 projects in the space, launching our mainnet in the next 3 to 6 weeks. So stay tuned for more Move fun.
Hey everyone, my name is Shayan. I'm a developer relations engineer at Movement Labs. Prior to Movement, I was working at Sui, funny enough, also as a DevRel, and really happy to have worked at both Sui and now Movement. I get to help developers write Move and help grow the greater Move ecosystem.
Hi all, I'm Dario. I am the manager of the Move team at Mysten. I did a presentation earlier today, so probably some of you know me already. That's pretty much it.
Good afternoon, everybody. David Walensky, head of engineering at Aptos Labs. A little bit about background for myself. Dario and I used to actually be colleagues about 3 different times. Once at Facebook, twice at Aptos. The reality has been a pleasure building inside the Move space. We've gotten to design and create a lot of new technologies, concepts, and if you want to, you can get into a nice conversation between Dario and myself about the pros and cons of Aptos objects versus Sui objects. I'm sure we could go all night on that topic.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that. My name is Josh, co-founder, CEO of Supra. We actually started by forking Aptos Move. It was more suitable for our architecture. We think Move language is really wonderful generally, but let's jump into it. So there are primarily 2 different Move languages, and thank God there's not more. And I do want to mention that last time I checked, there's over 2,000 people streaming, watching us live. So let's speak to both the expert developers as well as some of the early novices as to why Move language is interesting.
Just to be clear, we're all novices. There's no experts.
Yeah, true. Fair enough. Yeah, we're in it together. And you remember, it's us versus EVM. I'm just kidding. We love EVM too at Supra. Okay. No, but seriously, MoveLang is, we believe, is going to gain mass adoption slowly, surely, and then all at once. We think that the Web2 folks are going to understand Move easier. It's more intuitive to them. And frankly, we need more safety in this space. So jumping in, the first question is, in what ways does MoveVM improve security compared to other VMs? And then also, if you want to elaborate maybe on some of the differences between Sui Move and Aptos Move.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you went to the biggest novice first on this topic. I think there's several different ways, but I'll let Dario talk more about the core of Move since he was actually there building it out. I think in ways that Aptos is kind of further enhancing the core concepts of Moves, which I think is more about the resource-based programming, so you don't have to worry about dropping assets on the ground like you could, imagine transferring between Alice and Bob 5 coins on Ethereum. There's a good chance if you don't program that correctly, those 5 coins could just disappear into the ether. Or she could end up getting the coins twice and taking 10 coins from or whatever the story was. But double spending is a possibility. The complexity in the coding language, the reusability, these are all challenges that we see in other languages. Inside of Move, we made it a lot simpler. You can literally take 5 coins from Alice's wallet and put 5 coins into Bob's and make sure that's exactly what's happening. It's resource-based programming, which is a much nicer, cleaner concept. It's much more accessible to humans. And I also kind of feel like Move is more like a traditional Web 2 kind of programming language. So Web 2 developers can come in and start building and Move much more quickly. But in the context of Aptos, I think we've got a whole bunch of new technology coming out, but the biggest one that I think will impact developers today is mutation testing. And so we recognize that when developers are building applications, they oftentimes just want to ship as fast as possible. I mean, who wants to spend time debugging, testing, all that kind of stuff? But with mutation testing, you can do a small amount of testing, and this will then go ahead and annotate your code with additional ways of testing to identify even more bugs. And so we effectively want to make the developer's life cycle in Aptos to be as simple and easy as possible. There's a whole bunch of other stuff, but Dario's up here, and he might try to disprove me, so I'm going to skip over those.
Yeah, so I do want to comment that actually in one of our community chats earlier today, they're just talking about this kind of, frankly, as he said he's not even a programmer, but he's just starting and he's really enjoying programming with Move and he's picking up quickly. And this is great for the industry at large. And I really do think that MoveLang is a nice evolution in smart contract languages. And that is, once again, it may be a little bit slow to adopt, but I believe it's going to, my estimate is within 3 years, probably 35 to 40% of smart contract development will be in MoveLang. That's my personal point of view. But continuing with the question, this one for Darius, same one. How is SweMove different, or like, how does SweMove improve VM, security?
Yeah, so to be honest, first off, I want to say I don't believe that there is, in terms of security, that much difference between the Aptos or what the Aptos move and the SWE move. I mean, they're both strongly rooted into the what I'm calling legacy move, and I think those principles are, I think they're identical on both systems. I think, as David was pointing out, there is a evolution of the language. I think we were talking before, and you were saying modernizing the Move language, which is an absolutely correct term, right? Because Move started being an extremely simple language in attempted to be very secure. I think evolution of the language, they are kind of different, and they, as I was mentioning earlier today, I think they're also based on the semantics of the data store on the different systems. So it's hard to keep Move completely aligned, completely. But I think the security principles are the same. I think we were based around the concept of very common others VM, like say Java or the common language runtime or a system like that, with a strong verifier that verifies the property of the language. And again, that verifier has not really changed much between Aptos and SWE. So I would say we're still strongly rooted around the same principle. And I think that's the strength of Move. I don't know how much on the blockchain other system have a verification over the code. Probably no one else. So I would say that's probably the great value in my mind that we're offering as a MoveVM. And then, the aspect of reuse, right? I mean, the idea of building libraries and things like that, which I don't know how much the rest of you guys have seen around, meaning I think there is some reuse, but probably it's not as much as we would like to see yet. I don't know. What was your experience? But that's the other part where I think, we all need to go and Move needs to go. Overall, I think there are, as I was saying, in my presentation today, there are two aspects where I think all of us as Move community need to grow or give answers. I mean, one is the storage object model, whatever that is, right? Meaning the semantic of the data, even though that may be related to consensus and other things, so hard to tell. But the other one is versioning, as I was mentioning. I think versioning is the greatest evil. It's inevitable, but it's extremely complicated. So I think that's probably a space where we all need to grow more. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. But I really don't think there is that dichotomy between Aptos and SWE when it comes to the basic principle of Move.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe Shayan, so you have experience with SWE Move, Aptos Move, and EVM as well? Or maybe not so much? Minimal. Maybe we can talk about the differences between just MoveLang and other programming languages and your point of view.
Yeah, of course. So, like I said earlier, before working at Movement, which uses Aptos Move, I was working at SWE, which uses SWE Move. And I found the transition of going from SWE to Movement, or I guess from SWE Move to Aptos Move, to be honestly negligible in terms of the programming paradigm. So having worked both with SWE and Aptos Move, like I said, I thought the changes were very minimal. Like as you were saying, David, Aptos is more heavily resource oriented, whereas SWE really focuses on object orientation, the object orientation of it. But nevertheless, I thought that the overall semantics were still very similar. The paradigm was very similar, and yeah, I was able to re-pick Aptos Move up relatively quickly. And then I guess before we move on, I do have a question for you, David. It's not a big one, but I do want to ask because
This wasn't on the list, by the way.
it's not on the list. Is it okay?
Let's do it. Let's put me on the hot seat.
Go ahead.
You pay.
No, you'll hear it soon, right? So, Aptos recently introduced like objects, right? And like seeing that from Sui made it feel more like familiar, right? And so I guess a question I have to you is like, if you happen to know, would you happen to know like what percentage of like I guess like Aptos' developers have switched over to using objects versus what percent are like still like more comfortable with resources? You don't have to, yeah. I'm just
It's a
curious.
great question. It's honestly a great question. I don't typically look at data because I can't understand it. But I do like to talk to people, and I think you've seen a couple different variants. Like, I don't think we're seeing people build complex data structures using objects, but they do like the concept of ownership that objects bring. So when you're building out a DEX, you might actually have your positions potentially in objects attached to your account, or you could theoretically imagine the actual LP being stored in objects. So there is a lot of movement towards using objects for that. But then when you think about storing around like an order book, you're most likely going to do that inside of like the table structures, so you can build more efficient data structures. We actually have a guy out there, Alex from Maconia, who's built a substantial number of these, and I believe he only works in the space of tables. But maybe you could tell us how he's using objects later.
Cool, thank you. Sorry for the
No,
impromptu
it's
question.
all good. It's this is all information that's relevant to MoveLang, and we're gonna mostly stick to the script, but feel free to ask any questions that are relevant, that are educational. For Levy, so IOTA I think has a sidechain that's Ethereum based and has also now a Sui based chain. Can you share about the differences that that have driven that decision?
Right. So let's start at the beginning. So IOTA is running since 2016, and we've been employing a UTXO-based ledger model. But we only have limited programmability there. So what we did is we went around and looked at different VMs and options, and with security being kind of the number one priority for us, we said, which is the one that we can take, which is secure, easy to program with, and customizable to whatever extent we want. And then we landed on Move. By the time we did this, we already had this sidechain, the EVM sidechain. But the feedback we were actually getting is that it's not different than deploying with any other EVM chains, meaning that the same hacks can happen, the same exploits can happen, and there's not really a substantial improvement in how one ensures security there. So we chose Move exactly because of this, because we wanted to make our base layer as secure as possible. And the moment we started using both, we looked at both Aptos and SuiChain and their version of Move. But we kind of felt that the object-based ledger representation of user-owned objects and accounts provides an extra layer of security, especially if you're a wallet developer. So now you can structure your variables, your assets, your capabilities that interact with different contracts, being admin rights or whatsoever, and separate them into different objects and make sure that whenever you initiate a transaction, it's clear and visible to the user which kind of objects this call is having a permission to modify and which ones it don't. And this, we believe, is an extra layer of security that we get with MoveLang, and we really hope that we can contribute to making this a best practice across the industry.
Yeah, and I think developers find the object-oriented approach more intuitive. Like actually, when I first heard about how smart contracts work on Ethereum, I was like, oh, that's not what I thought. Like a list of addresses. But moving forward here, the next question is, in terms of recent innovations, what are some recent innovations in the MoveVMs that you think are the most interesting?
I can say something that it's an interesting question. I think there are evolution of Move as a language everywhere. We are Aptos, and I suppose whoever else is gonna take over Move again has to modernize the language. There has been a lot of work I taken on the front end of the language, making the language much more ergonomic. So there's a lot of that. That's not really strictly speaking VM related stuff. For the VM, there has been work around enhancing certain features. That one feature has to come still. In my mind, is composition, and I don't know that, at least for us, we have yet the story that we dream of, and we're certainly going in that direction. But But overall, it's really just a steady evolution of the language that has been taking place everywhere. That I think has been really good.
I can chime in a little bit. So starting at the base layer, Aptos introduced block STM for parallelization. So this is an optimistic concurrency layer. If you look at something like Sui, Solana, you have to specify your inputs and outputs so you can effectively ensure static level parallelization. And we didn't want to go through that path for the developers. We want to keep them innocent and developing happily like they were in Ethereum, but obviously with the better programmability of Move. And so Block STM kind of came in to help solve that problem. But one of the issues that you're going to find out is you may have conflicts, and the conflicts are detected at runtime. That has performance limitations. Then also the other thing we found out with Block STM v1 was effectively that you have a limit on your parallelization just because of the nature in which you're handling the concurrency stuff. So we're actually coming up with a Block STM v2 with the intent being effectively, even if we handle an entire sequential workload, you won't see any major slowdowns from going through the dynamic parallelism. Going one layer above that, Dario is absolutely right. Like the VM itself probably has small wins here and there. Obviously, you can continue to squeeze out performance. You can add in new natives, like Aptos just added in natives for memory movement, which is really critical because we're a Merkle-based data storage system, which means every single new slot that you add into the Merkle tree adds in extra cost. So you want to reduce how many new slots you add in. Sui didn't go through that path, so they make it a lot easier for their core VM. And then kind of going one step up, we have at the actual language layer that I'm particularly excited about is we released enums towards the end of last year. This basically enables you data immutability, like versioning of your data. So, you've got that data structure you come up with in your CLOB v1, and you're like, well, shit, we missed out a whole bunch of fields, or the area has changed. Now we need more information. We need to evolve. So the enums allow you to have this transparent upgrade path that doesn't require massive amounts of complexity. And then I think the other one that's really critical and very challenging at the same time is dynamic dispatch. Move was built to prevent re-entrancy. Dynamic dispatch kind of goes against that. And so we spent a lot of time analyzing how to bring a dynamic dispatch to the forefront and give you this amazing programmability while still, having to, eat your cake and enjoy it too. And so we actually had a version of that ship with our fungible asset standard, which is how you do with currency on chain. But we're generalizing that in the next few months and hopefully going to have a release.
Yeah. So I just want to make a comment here. So it is interesting that Sui and Solana are including the rewrite set in the transaction. One thing that we observed at Supra is that actually bandwidth more than execution may be a limitation in blockchain. So if your transaction size is actually 2 or 3 times larger because you're specifying the rewrite set, you actually have a limitation on the maximum TPS as a result, if bandwidth in fact is the issue, limitation here. Nonetheless, I am also, by the way, very curious to understand Block STM v2. Would love to maybe have you talk a little bit more about that a bit later. But yeah, Dario, please continue.
Yeah, what I want to sort of comment on what David was saying in a couple of things. I mean, one thing is that as David said, it's not really the MoveVM. If we're talking about evolution and changes into the blockchain, that's a different conversation, right? I mean, not the MoveVM per se, right? So we certainly have something with object ownership that is coming, a multi-party object that is very interesting. I want to just have a comment over the enum used for versioning, and just mention that I said that in my presentation today, that I think versioning is going to be the big deal that the Move community has to answer properly. I think that the idea that you can freely version your data as data is an absolute dream. I don't think it's feasible. I think there are people that rely on the shape of the data outside of the blockchain. They have monitoring, they have alarm. People wake up at 2 a.m. because you change the data. So I don't think, actually, I really think I think it's the wrong effort to look at as data layout versioning as an issue. I really don't think it's an issue. I think it's the wrong way to look at the problem. That's more my personal point of view than necessarily Mysten or other. So I just wanted to mention that because it's, I don't know, I think it's important.
I mean, absolutely, you're absolutely right. but there's shades of gray, especially when you're doing application development in the early phases, or you're in a nascent ecosystem where changes don't necessarily hurt. But I've got one of our good engineers out there, Greg, who can tell you when we push out a new transaction payload, just a minor new byte, and we're using enums everywhere. So this is easy from a coding perspective, but then we have to go to every single centralized exchange, every single DEX, every single partner that's running infrastructure, and say, you have to do an upgrade, and you might have to change your internal schemas to be prepared to handle that change. And so, Dario is absolutely right. The more core you are to an ecosystem, the more dependencies that you don't know about, the data immutability becomes a nightmare.
Shayan or Levy, any point of view in terms of significant recent innovations in MoveVM?
I would like to tackle this question more from the tooling side, because I think one missing piece of the developer tooling around Move is the package management. And I think Sui in this regard is doing a really good job with the Mover, if I pronounce it correctly, the Move Package Manager. What I would love to see with this effort is that we push it across ecosystems. And what I mean is, why don't we have a package manager which works both for Aptos chains, for Sui chains, so that we provide the options for developers to reuse code, reuse battle-tested code, and not everybody has to rewrite everything from scratch. So for me, this Mover Package Manager is one of the important innovations, and I would actually like to urge everyone to look at it, and let's try to build it cross-chain.
And just to give some color to this conversation, biasly enough, I think one of the things, not so much to do with the language, but I think one of the things that Movement is doing is really cool, is the fact that I think of all the chains here, we are the only modular chain, right? So I think where all the other chains are more or less like, everything is done in-house, from execution, data availability, settlement. One of the coolest things that, in my opinion, Movement does is that we leverage Celestia for data availability, and we ultimately settle on Ethereum. So I think Movement is doing a lot to push the envelope there on how we could potentially bring Move to other chains. So this isn't live yet, but one of the things we're also working on is the greater Movement network, where we'll be able to offer rollups as a service. So similar to what Caldera is doing on EVM chains, where you're allowed to deploy a new EVM chain in just a few lines of code. I think the goal for us is to be able to expand Move similarly, to be able to have a new Move chain on Ethereum or Solana or whatever in as few lines of code as possible.
One question a little bit off script here is I'm just curious about this as I have you folks on stage. You mentioned, David, dynamic dispatch. How do we balance type security, type safety, and security in general? And is Sui considering dynamic dispatch at all, or just saying we're not doing this?
So we do have a dynamic dispatch coming. It's not really. So let me put it this way: with respect to what David said, we do not believe that dynamic dispatch has to come in the form of reentrancy. And I think that's really where we are shooting for. We think we have a story where you can define signature or whatever you want to call without reentrancy coming into the picture. We think that can build very well in the compositional aspect of PTBs. So we're really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be this year. It's going to be really, really good. So I agree with David, that there is, again, the language has to evolve. There is no question about that. I feel non-reentrancy is a pillar of Move as a language, and I think it should stay there. Of course, time will probably prove me wrong and show that actually it's impossible to have the reentrancy without to have dynamic dispatching without reentrancy. But we think we have a story, and we think it's important. So yes, we're doing that, and it's a critical aspect.
So Dario might be able to keep me honest here. To be clear, I'm not a language developer, but I do dabble a little there and talk to the folks in that space, and do come up with crazy ideas every now and then. But right now in Aptos and all these Move chains, we have this concept of natives, and this effectively allows you to go from code that's running in the VM to code that's running natively in your Rust or whatever your blockchain layer is. And when you're actually doing that, that's kind of effective like a dispatch call, and you have to translate the parameters that you're taking from in the nice, safe Move space to this dangerous, unsafe Rust space. And so that's the same problem you have to solve when you're doing the dynamic dispatch. And so when we built out the dynamic fungible asset, or the dispatchable fungible asset concept, we effectively just leveraged natives to bypass and go directly and make a secondary call back into the VM. And so it's kind of like the same type of problem. As long as you're doing the type safety checks at the right places at the right time, you're going to be okay. If you screw it up, which it's not that hard to, well, then everybody's going to be screwed. And that, to me, is the foundation of Move, is just making sure you have the verifier doing the right stuff at the right place at the right time.
So quickly, there is no doubt in my mind that you can build the dynamic dispatch the way they are. No question about that. But I want to say one more thing. You are a wonderful dev, and I think there is like you, the head of engineering. Aptos could have not picked a better person than you. Just wanted to say that. So don't sell yourself short. You know what you're doing.
That's great. Yeah, we got to stick together, guys. Okay, let's move forward. So, evolution of Move. Most interesting things upcoming that you'd like to see in the space that maybe hadn't had a chance to get to right now. This is for anyone. How do you see Move evolving in the next years or two?
One thing that I would definitely love to see is debugging tools, because today it's really hard for a developer to write a Move contract and debug it step by step, see the values in the registers, and basically have an idea of what's going on and why is it failing or why it is not failing. So that's one area where we at IOTA definitely want to focus in the next 1 or 2 years, trying to build tools around how developers interact with the language, how they test their code, and just give them a safe space where they can innovate freely.
Just to chime on that, I mean, the reason why I am such a good Move programmer is because I was also a good C programmer, and I used printfs. And it's fundamentally beautiful.
What's gonna go there? So for what it's worth, I mean, shameless plug. We have debugging or Move in Sui now. And we're gonna have debugging on transactions very, very quickly and very soon. But overall, I think actually tooling. So for instance, I loved some of the things that David said before. I didn't know about there's testing framework that allows you to find I would say so almost iterate over testing, where some test generates more tests and things like that. I think tooling in my mind is really I agree with you 100%, is this space where we all as Move need to make a big leap. It's absolutely critical. So yes, there is a lot of move changes that are coming, but I think tooling and the mover, as you were saying, that ecosystem, which you may have something already. I don't know if you guys have something as well, where like an ecosystem where it's easy to discover packages, find out what is the usage of packages, right? I mean, like literally data around how many people are using that, how many bugs have been found there, and all those kind of things. I think that the ecosystem to me is critical together with tooling.
I think the one of the biggest things that currently exists but is underutilized is like the Move Prover. So if I'm not mistaken, it no longer exists on Sui, right? Or
Correct.
Okay, right. But it still exists on Aptos Move. So a lot of like the members of our research team have been like working with it, been tinkering with it, just to ensure that like you can prove like for every single like potential outcome of like when you're writing your code. I think that is super cool. Like, and yeah, back when like I was just like only tinkering with Aptos, back when I was actually at Sui, it's something that I'd heard of, something I knew existed, something whose code I've seen, but not something that has been like actively talked about. So I think like doing more work there, I think like that's like your guys' point, like the whole point of Move is to like provide security. And I think that this is a super interesting tool that like already exists, but I guess maybe the developers maybe like you said, developers just want to ship. They don't want to test for like every single potential case. But nevertheless, I think it's very cool, and would like to see it matured. And with on the topic of tooling, I think one of the biggest things that is still missing across both flavors of Move is a complete tool like Hard Hat or Foundry that exists on Ethereum. So I think maybe even like more than like Aptos or Sui, a lot of people coming to Movement were from Ethereum. And like one of the biggest things they asked us is like, hey, if we want to like test against like a current state of the blockchain, how can we do that? And unfortunately we have to say like you can't, right? So I think coming up with like more tools, especially the ones that the Ethereum developers are more familiar with, will do more to cement Move as like a serious language. And I think, yeah, is something that would benefit like all five of us here, all five of our
I love that.
blockchains. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is like the hard hats. Aptos actually is starting to kick off a project called Workspace. Would definitely check it out. Currently, it's mostly towards building out your testing infrastructure, your end-to-end app. Ultimately, I think forking of the blockchain so you can actually do testing on a local version of mainnet or testnet, whatever it might be, is paramount. I mean, this actually comes in from a lot of the more sophisticated Ethereum developers. We spend a lot of time talking to Aave, which has been a blessing and a curse because all they do is make more demands about how immature we are from a tooling perspective. The other thing I'm particularly excited about, and I think Mysten actually got ahead here, was IDE development. You always underestimate how important it is to meet your developers where they are, not where you are. Like I said, I use Vim for goodness sakes. I manually go through all my move files to find out the APIs. I am completely opposite of almost every single developer in our ecosystem, which makes me the worst person to dictate what we should do with tooling that we need. When we were building out Workspace, I said, I can do this with my SDK. Why do I need this? And they're like, we're going to do it anyway, David. I said, God bless you. And it's widely demanded. And so I do think we need to go further down this pathway, whether it's better IDEs or Cursor came out. And so Cursor's this really great AI-based IDE. Where is Move in the AI space? And I think I've talked to a handful of individuals, especially from, I think I talked to a few in the Mysten space, and the feedback is you train the model a little bit and it kind of gets Move, but it doesn't have any other language concepts. And so you have to teach it other things. And as you teach it more things, it gets completely confused and starts spitting out Move-looking Rust or other nonsense like that. And so there are a lot of different fun challenges in the tooling space. I think in terms of like the core language, we could have probably largely kept it what we had 2 years ago, and developers wouldn't be none for the wiser, but it's also fun to build out new cool language features because that's what also gets people excited.
Yeah, I mean, it's critical for us to listen to our engineers and developers that are, for feedback to make our ecosystem more mature. We do live in a multi-chain reality, right? And different chains run different virtual machines. Maybe we can talk about how each of your respective chains plan to do any interoperability, maybe with Ethereum, if you're doing it or not, and how these VMs might interact. I can talk a little bit on our side as Supra. So we are actually trying to, develop a multi-VM layer one, and the way we're planning to handle kind of interoperability within Supra itself across VMs is a very difficult research question, right? First of all, but we're actually looking into STM approach, like software transactional memory approaches, to actually enable composability across VMs. But also beyond that, I'm just kind of letting you guys know that this is a very difficult challenge, but also a very interesting one. And we think an STM approach is possible. It's going to be a lot of engineering work, but we think there's a lot of potential there. But still, even beyond Supra's ecosystem, from Supra to another layer one or through Aptos, movement or IOTA, my understanding is that Sui is rolling out a bridge and Aptos is as well, right? Is that correct? Or is that right? You guys have your own bridge?
No, we leverage partner bridges. So we've got Layer 0, Seller, Wormhole. We've got Chainlink coming on board later this year. We may dabble and explore that, but I want to hear Dario's perspective on the value of a native bridge before we go down that path.
I would love to hear your point of view as well.
The idea of the bridge for us was to create a system that had the same guarantees that the chain has got, right? I mean, so the bridge and the native bridge for us was to focus on specific assets. It's not clear how our bridge is going to evolve compared to more sophisticated solutions or bridging solution like, say, Chainlink, Wormhole or whatever that is. And I don't think we're going to go there, to be entirely honest. I think it was more to, as I said, create a system where the guarantees and the safety of the system is the same as that of the network itself, given the validator are running the bridge node, etc. And it was very tactical, I would say, in a sense. It was incredibly helpful at the time. again, it's not clear where the bridge is going to evolve. I mean, that's all. Bridging technology seems interesting. It's coming along, a lot. I don't know how real it is. I mean, and actually, I'm curious to hear from everybody else. You were mentioning the cross chain. If there is really a cross chain story, I mean, we're looking into that. I think there is something there. I'm just not clear. I'm super curious about what people think about that because it's difficult.
I actually have a question before. So I remember, when I was at SWE, the native bridge was being talked about. It wasn't public yet, and I had a question then. I never asked it, and I think now is a good time to ask it. Why is SWE building its own native bridge when you can easily just utilize like layer 0 or wormhole? Like, why would you want to what is the value proposition for the native bridge that is not being delivered by like one of the partner solutions?
Yeah, I think it's the guarantees that I was talking about more than anything else. I don't know. I mean, partnership are funny in this business, in crypto. I think we care about those partners and we have, good things going. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I don't know exactly what the answer is, except for what I said. That feeling that a solution that gave you the guarantees that the network does was helpful for the specific scenarios that we had.
I nevertheless think it's cool, right? It's like always cool to innovate, to see like what will like SWE end up doing differently than Wormhole or Mysten. Like you mentioned the validator, so I think it's interesting. But yeah, I want to know if there's another reason. I think that's totally valid. But thanks.
I think there's also a performance win by not having to require another consensus layer between your host or your source and your destination. And so, they can just simply ship their payloads over to EVM and boom, you're done. No additional trust necessary.
Though the 18 minutes that it takes on EVM for a transaction to be makes that whole performance state.
Well put.
Levy, you please jump.
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back to the fact that IOTA is actually multi-VM, but on multi-layers today. So we have our layer 1, which is going to be move-based, and the layer 2, which is an IOTA EVM. So it's been one of our goals as the research and engineering department to bring that EVM down. And as you mentioned previously, it's not a trivial problem to solve. If you just want to have, yet another execution environment running next to your MoveVM, then it's fairly easy and straightforward to do. But the holy grail here is how you enable cross-chain calls. And I think that's a problem which no one so far has solved yet, because it's not trivial. We also don't have the answers yet, but this is one area where we definitely are focusing our efforts on.
I couldn't actually hear. The Holy Grail was what again?
Cross VM calls. So when you basically call a move function from a EVM call or vice versa.
Got it. Yeah, we actually were working on that. It's difficult. I'm not going to say we have the answer. I think we have the best answer so far, though. Not many folks are working on this. Cross VM calls. We actually have a bridge native as well. Cross-chain well, it's actually not a bridge. We call it bridgeless because our layer 1 nodes, are running it. Same with SWE. And I guess we kind of came to the same conclusion on our own. But basically how it works is in a proof of stake world, right? When you're aware of the validator set of the chains you're interacting with, you can just recompute their consensus. Proof of stake, you have to stake, so you have to register your stake. And every epoch where there's new nodes joining or leaving, you have to sign off on a new set of nodes. So it's actually pretty trivial for us to get this information. And so from for example, so we're Aptos to Supra, we just have to know your validator sets to your public addresses and just recompute this. The motivation for this is actually layer 1 to layer 1 security. You don't have the trust assumption of a middleware bridge, which are traditionally much, much less nodes and less economic security. And also, David, as you pointed out, latency. So there's less hops and rounds of consensus required to achieve this. But yeah, I think we're all kind of exploring the space and have different design decisions and priorities. But yeah, let's keep on going here. This is a fascinating conversation. So let's move into use cases. So, okay, Dario, of course, go ahead.
Can I ask David what you guys think about the cross chain thing? I mean, I'm actually curious. The cross chain story. Do you think there is a story going on there? I mean, what did you have feelings specifically about that?
Well, I have lots of feelings, but I don't know about this specific question. Yeah, wrong way to end that question. So I think when you're creating a new chain, a new layer one, the bridges are paramount because that's how you bring in your stables. And now that Aptos has native stables across the board, we just brought even in USDE as well, I think it does change the conversation into, well, what is the next stage for the bridges? And I honestly, I haven't spent time talking to the businesses or the product teams to understand what that problem space is. I've heard phrases like RWAs want it. I believe you can also see cases where, you can see like the gold of Bitcoin or the silver of Ethereum coming in and being used as collateral. I think there's also the value in not having to go to a centralized exchange when you want to move around your liquidity. But when you think about USDC having CCTP, which allows native transfers, I was asking folks, how do you bring in USDT across two different chains? The answer is always first swap to USDC. And it's just like, wow, that's great. And I do know they're coming up with new technology, like there's USDT 0 coming out. So that's really exciting. But I would fundamentally love to have a conversation with people that are seeing the value in what bridges bring later on. I mean, there is a reason why Chainlink is bringing their bridge to Aptos. I just have only focused on the technical aspects and not so much the business.
But let me ask you one thing, because as I was saying, I mean, to be honest, Joshua mentioned, you were talking about calling a cross chain, right? Calling a function cross chain, which is not exactly bridging, strictly speaking, right? And you're not putting an asset. You're just trying to use a coordination layer across chain. And to me, that part is even more difficult to understand, to be honest. And it feels like it's an interesting story, and I'm curious if anybody or in the panel has any idea about that. But it feels like it's interesting, but I don't know actually if it's just hype and nothing else. I'm really not clear.
But go ahead.
But currently, at least in our stack, the cross-chain calls, you can encode an EVM transaction on our layer 1 as a payload, send it to a contract, which then unwraps it, and the layer 2 acts and treats it as normal EVM transactions. So in principle, you could do this message passing with passing around, transactions, but then you need to somehow synchronize the wallets to have the correct nonce, to have the correct state, etc., etc. So I agree, it's not something that is solved overall.
And did you find that difficult? Did you find that, something that has a future or?
Well, whether it has a future or not, I think it's definitely needed because we have so many chains that somehow you have to solve interop, and this is one way to solve it. However, I'm not sure how you would create the actor that is able to supervise all these cross-chain calls and synchronize them together.
On that note, one thing that I've always been kind of curious about, and I have a long Slack thread on the concept of chain abstraction that we could easily do with inside of Aptos. Mystic could probably copy us instead of us them for once. But the concept is we have this technology called keyless. You don't even have to download a wallet, and you can start interacting with Aptos. Then you can imagine through the miracle or magic of bridges, we can start to actually relaying calls from your home on Aptos to your assets on Ethereum or Solana or wherever you are, but you're never downloading wallets. You're never managing all this nonsense. You're just going through this beautiful chain abstraction that leverages the concept of actually calling remote function calls, but doing smart contract magic to make sure that's actually authorized and verified and the right way to do things. So there is a very strong possibility in that pathway, but
I would love to export that solution.
And the way we handle this in Supra is effectively the smart contract on the destination chain will verify our state commitment. So we do the activity, we have the consensus proof of the state commitment. The smart contract verifies that, and it's BLS based. So, and I think some upgrade in Ethereum, I forget which one, but it's coming in April, I believe. It's going to be even more efficient for BLS. So I think we're going to have a tighter interoperability there, actually. I think we're all BLS based. Yeah, so that's good for us. Yeah. Okay, cool. So BLS signatures for the win. So look, some of our chains are, we have different functionality. So for example, Aptos, you guys are rolling out a pretty novel DVRF randomness, on-chain randomness. Sui has a bridge and storage. Before maybe IOTA and Movement, you guys talk about your infrastructure, some innovations there that can enable some new use cases. And then also for Aptos and Sui, what are some new things you're seeing emerging from the infrastructure layer that you're putting together?
So as you were mentioning for storage, the Walrus story for us, I think, it's something that, we're really looking forward. We'll see what's going to come out of that. But the thing that is interesting is that it's a non-DeFi kind of solution that has a lot of values in being built on a blockchain as a synchronization layer, and has the ability to control massive amount of data and to build logic around that data. We're actually looking forward to that. We'll see what's going to come out of that, because you never know. But that's definitely a technology that we have a lot of interest and passion for, and we'll see what's happening.
My understanding is you guys are calling that verifiable data, right? Because
Correct, and that's because you have guarantees, right? Okay, you don't have the data, but effectively you have the guarantees that the data exists and the data is there, and the data has a specific lifetime. So again, I would say the data aspect itself is interesting, but I don't want to say it's not central, because it is central. But it's the coordination layer, it's the ability to build a smart contract and to build things around your data that allows you to manage the data effectively over time, and maybe even over a long period of time, which makes that transparent, because you see the data and the managing of that. And I don't know. I mean, again, we're looking forward. It's an interesting story, I think.
yeah, it's super, because we have the Oracle service. We call the data that we finalize verifiable data, because we run around a consensus. I believe we've provided data to each of you. Happy to do so. In terms of, by the way, for Walrus, I wanted to ask, are other chains going to be able to use your storage, or is it just exclusively for Sui?
I mean, they could, yes, they need the integration layer, obviously. So I think it's a good question. I don't know exactly the answer to that question.
I'll answer, because there's actually public information about that. So we have other colleagues that are no longer inside of Facebook, but they also created their own chains. Linera, Matthew Baudet, he actually has an agreement for Linera to be using Walrus. So it is absolutely interoperable. It's great that Mysten doesn't build things for Sui alone; they build it for the entire Web3 ecosystem.
I was kidding.
Eventually, we all hope to get back into the good graces of Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for funding it, funding MoveLang.
But I think even with regards to Walrus, I think even internally we were discussing whether or not it would be possible to use Walrus for DA, for movement, and the team said that we definitely could. And for different, I was mentioning earlier, the Move rollup solutions, other chains would be able to use whatever solutions they want for data availability and settlement. So we're using Celestia, but if someone else would want to use, Walrus, Celestia, there's other solutions too. I think that's more for just storage, because I think Walrus is unique. That is kind of like Celestia and IPFS together, but nevertheless, there are different DA solutions out there, and I think the beauty of it is that other chains, other teams, should they want to build their own Move rollup, a modular rollup, right, would be able to use Walrus, for example.
Okay. Yeah, so basically, in your respective ecosystems, what are some of the cooler ideas and applications that are being built that you're excited about?
There is a project called TWIN, stands for Trade Worldwide Information Network in IOTA, which is one of the, I think, exciting non-DeFi use cases of blockchain. And what it actually does is it provides a platform for trade industry partners to verifiably manage their trade documents and data and trade finance, and reduce a lot of time and friction in physically shipping goods all around the world. So we have a pilot project live right now, which is about shipping goods from Kenya to the UK. And the feedback that we are getting with this is that tremendous amount of time, which translates to tremendous amount of money in case of goods, is being saved by a solution on the blockchain. So one is able to prevent carrying around huge suitcases of paper by digitizing these documents, saving the hashes on the blockchain, maybe one day saving the data on Walrus as well, and letting smart contracts taking care of providing access to different parties. We also built an identity framework around that verifiable credentials and whatnot to be able to show it to customs officers so that they don't have to spend hours and sometimes days reviewing physically signed documents. So that is one use case that is a flagship project for IOTA, and we are really excited about the effects that this can bring to global trade.
Great. Shayan?
Yeah. Avail was the other DA solution. It was on the tip of my tongue. Well, yeah, I think some of the more like novel use cases that I mean, like just like I don't think any of these use cases are unique to like just like movements flavor of Move, right? Because I think at the end of the day, like the Move language itself is very flexible, and you could pretty much like do like any project on like any of these chains. But what I have realized is that our developers are able to go from like idea to MVP to like even a product in such a short amount of time that like the feedback that we've been getting that Move is just such a like relief makes it very interesting for like deep in solutions for actually I do want to talk about deep in solutions. So like one of our teams is actually building like this very cool product on top of Movement where essentially they want to take like the telemetry data from Teslas and be able to essentially redistribute this information back to the users like on this token. So I think a lot of cool things are being done in the space of like both AI, deepin, etc. This is obviously like very unique in that sense is that you're able to get this data, like tokenize it, monetize it, because I think like similar to what you were saying earlier, Josh, is that like objects or resources are much more intuitive for like our developers. Like, at least I've seen like our developers are able to like intuit what they're building much more quickly, and as a result, they're able to like iterate on like more like novel ideas, and like these ideas that may have otherwise been like much more challenging, at least like in Ethereum.
Dario, would you like to talk about any interesting projects that maybe we might not have heard of on Sui?
I think Walrus is really the big deal for us right now, and I think the one project that we are hoping is gonna shift a little bit the paradigm of how you do things on Sui and on chain. Of course, DeFi is gonna be a key player for a long time still, if not forever. But yeah, that's I think that's the one thing that I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really seeing what that's gonna bring in.
David?
Oh, I'm going to try to sound smart, but I'm probably going to fail at it. I think trading is absolutely the baseline. Right now, we've got a company out there. They were able to push out about 1,000 transactions per second per single marketplace. I think we need to be able to go much, much more than that. And so I think the question is how do we change the technology to allow for that interweaving of transactions to be efficient? So that's probably a deeper integration between Move or the blockchain itself and trading platforms. So that's one area. I also think a lot of the tech that we built out in terms of on-chain randomness with the intersection of games and payments is a big one. We have a group called Supervillains that enable you to effectively open up capsules on chain that will randomly give you one of their sidekicks. Is that something that is verifiable, provable, and something that is just really instantaneous? So it's really cool that you can actually basically get a pack of cards, like a Pokemon set of cards, open it all on chain. But I think these are all kind of like building blocks, and we have to recognize, we have to have the solid building blocks of trading platforms, of payment services before we can build even more expressive, expansive applications, especially for, general purpose layer ones. And so, longer term, I'm actually really excited about, some of the concepts like that IOTA is probably going to be able to chase earlier, which is more of like being a communication platform, a plane to like help coordinate between multiple different parties. Back in my PhD era, I was in the precursor of like VPN, or P2P VPNs, and I look at what we've built in the space of blockchain technologies, solving like 95% of the problems that we had in front of us with a payment rail on top of it. The only thing that's missing is we haven't plugged back in the ability to have that actual deep connections between parties to set up these links. And then once you get past that point, the network interconnectivity, you then can imagine all these peer-to-peer applications that are bootstrapping directly on top of blockchains. And I think maybe Walrus is probably an example of that type of application space. But that's my 5-10 year vision, and we've got so much work to do before that.
Yeah, there certainly is a lot to do. You mentioned VRF or on-chain randomness. Just for the folks that don't know, blockchains are deterministic systems. It's hard to get they're perfectly ordered, right? So it's hard to get randomness and chaos into a blockchain. So you have to use novel cryptographic techniques to do that. We also have on-chain randomness as well. It, it can it's particularly good for GameFi. I do also want to mention that Supra is planning to move towards what we call an intra layer, a middleware coordination layer. We'd love to plug into each of you. We've actually already made demos and prototypes of Supra Aptos, Supra Sui. Love to do movement, love to do IOTA. In Ethereum, we have a prototype with Ethereum as well. And once we have EVM done, we can start to deploy really quickly. And once again, what's nice about our approach is it's still layer one to layer one to layer one the whole time. And it should be faster, more secure, and move based. Last couple minutes, I've signaled we don't have much time left, but I do want to get your opinions on the following, which is AI meets blockchain, hype, future, or complete trash. I have my strong opinions, but I would like you guys to go first.
I mean, I already showed the AI earlier on, so I'm all in. I mean, there's so many problems that AI could theoretically solve. Whether or not it can practically do it today is probably not going to happen. But my thesis is blockchains, Web3 is really freaking hard. AI can eliminate a lot of that. In particular, give a quick fun story. When Aptos was still nascent, which it still kind of is, there were some decent APRs for some wormhole USDC. I'm like, oh, I'm going to ape into this. And so I go to my favorite cheap Ethereum chain, which was Avalanche at the time, and I move over a bunch of USDC over there, and I go to Wormhole. I'm like, let's bring this into Aptos. Goes through pretty seamlessly. I hop over to my Petra wallet on Aptos, and I see I don't have USDC. I have USDC AV. I'm like, what? I was puzzled, and I went to our swaps, and they're like, yeah, you've got any liquid asset. I'm like, F me. And so what can I do? Did I just lose all that money I brought over? Well, fortunately, I was able to ship it back to Avalanche, but on my way shipping it back, the transaction halted. Why? Because it was above a certain limit. I was aping and it wasn't child's play. And there was no warning, no error message, just transaction's not making progress. So I spent the next hour or two trying to debug it. And I finally found out that there is a 24-hour window to wait for these things to basically, I guess, be risk analyzed or whatever nonsense. But there's no real confirmation that that's actually what happened. It's just my thesis now. And so every 5 minutes for the next 22 hours I have left, I go and verify, can I make progress? No, of course not. But fortunately, at that 24th hour, it finally went through. It was the least stress I've ever experienced. I didn't tell my wife about this. I probably will never. But I then realized that how difficult it is for, great, let's delete these. But yeah, so effectively, that was a horrible experience where AI theoretically could have done a bunch of analysis and said, ultimately, David, you're about to do something really stupid. Let me give you an alternative approach that will give you the highest value for what you're trying to do, which is just get me a high APR, and I don't care how you go about doing it.
So yeah, for me, there is a lot of hype around that, but the progress that AI has made in the past years, to be honest, is shocking for me. It's insane. I mean, it almost feels like all those movies with Blade Runner style or whatever. They are just behind around the corner. It's really incredible. So is AI gonna play a role? I think it's gonna play a role everywhere, no doubt. Is AI gonna play a role in terms of simplifying things, as David was saying? That's probably the one thing that is coming quickly because it seems pretty incredible. When AI is gonna add real value, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, but I think AI is here to stay. There is no question about that in my mind.
So we recently had an AI hackathon, and I would say like a good number of the submissions were, like glorified chatbots, right? Someone says something on Twitter, gives the most like generic response ever. And, I could go without seeing that. It doesn't really contribute anything to me. It doesn't make me happier. It doesn't give any new insights. But, at the same time, like actual AI companies like Claude and OpenAI are making these huge strides. And like with regard to writing Move, funny enough, I tried Claude Sonnet 3.7, and like compared to just like a week earlier, I thought like it was a night and day difference. So I think when it does come to like even writing a newer language like Move, I'm even like a few months ago I was surprised at how good it was, and obviously every iteration is going to be better than the last. So I think AI is definitely here to stay. As like from a developer's point of view, yeah, it's like definitely made me like prototype much more quickly. And yeah, with regard to, so that's like on the developer side. When it comes to like, the actual application side, I think yeah, stuff like we were mentioning, like an agent, for example, that could like scan the code base in a fraction of the time it would take you to read it, and it would be identify that, oh hey, you would experience this problem. Stuff like that is definitely awesome, and like a tangible help, right? Not just the one like those chatbots that regurgitate like the sentiment or whatever. So I'm in that boat. I think AI is here to stay. Regardless, there's a lot of hype right now, but I think that's like with anything, right? So yeah.
Well, I second your opinions and would like to add that I don't think AI will solve all the problems in blockchain, but there are definitely problems that it can help with. And on the developer sides, definitely. Automating whatever you can is the best, I guess, which we can get right now from AI. But we will need serious human brain power as well to solve the big challenges in blockchain.
Yeah, I tend to agree that AI is going to help with development. It'll also help with your intents. This is what my intention is to do this. Help me figure it out. Like these solvers, right? Of course, you're going to need to have data of every single chain, and it has to be able to scan everything. So it comes down to UX actually and developer tools. So I'm glad that we didn't focus on like, oh yeah, an AI coin, that a chatbot on Twitter that's worth $1 billion. It's good experiments. I mean, and this is how it starts out as a toy, but yeah, I think for sure AI has a huge future, and I think blockchain has a huge role also, especially verifiable data to keep AI honest. The thing that we need to solve for, which is a difficult cryptographic problem, is how do you prove in real time that the AI model you're speaking or engaging with is what you think it is, and that it was trained on the right data? So this is actually some territory for us as blockchain folks. But yeah, in terms of developer experience and user experience, AI can definitely help. I think there will be some demos here. So some folks that have a DEX using AI kind of just to talk about what it's trying to do and using our native automation network to execute it. Well, that's it for us. Thank you guys so much for your time and joining us. And let's make sure we keep on pushing the Move language forward and collaborate and, compete with class. And yeah, thanks so much.